Some animals don't want to be rescued, but this one looked like it was begging for help. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Daniel Brooks had driven the same lonely highway outside of Cedar Ridge, Montana, thousands of times before, but that freezing November night felt different from the moment his truck's headlights cut through the thick fog rolling over the empty road. The rain had finally stopped an hour earlier, leaving the pavement slick and shining beneath the pale moonlight, and the old country radio station crackled softly as Daniel rubbed his tired eyes after another late shift at the repair shop. That was when he saw it. Something small moved near the guardrail up ahead. At first, Daniel thought it was a raccoon or maybe a coyote pup, but as his headlights passed over the creature, it suddenly stepped into the middle of the road and froze. Daniel slammed on the brakes hard enough for the tires to screech across the wet asphalt. Jesus, he muttered under his breath as the truck came to a stop just a few feet away. The tiny animal didn't run. It simply stood there staring directly at him. Daniel slowly opened the driver's side door, cold wind rushing against his face as he climbed out, holding a flashlight from the center console. The creature looked like a puppy, but something about it immediately felt wrong. Its fur was unusually dark, almost silver-black beneath the moonlight, and its legs seemed slightly too long for its body. Rainwater dripped from its thin coat, while its eyes reflected the flashlight with an eerie golden shine Daniel had never seen in any dog before. The puppy didn't bark. It didn't whimper. It only watched him in complete silence. "Hey there," Daniel said cautiously, crouching a few feet away. "Where'd you come from?" The strange puppy tilted its head slowly, almost like it understood him. Daniel noticed fresh mud covering its paws and a deep scratch running along its side. Whatever this thing was, it had been hurt recently. He glanced around the empty highway, expecting to see another car, a nearby house, or maybe someone searching for a missing pet. But there was nothing except miles of dark forest stretching beyond the road. The puppy suddenly took one careful step toward him, then another. Daniel held still as the animal approached close enough for him to hear its breathing. Even that sounded unusual, lower and rougher than any puppy he'd ever heard before. For a brief second, Daniel felt a strange chill crawl up his spine. Something deep in his gut warned him to get back in the truck and drive away. But then the tiny creature pressed itself gently against his boot, shivering from the cold rain, and that feeling disappeared almost instantly. Daniel sighed softly. "Yeah, I know that look," he murmured. He had seen it before years ago in shelter dogs nobody wanted. Fear, exhaustion, loneliness. Daniel carefully removed his flannel jacket and wrapped it around the trembling animal before lifting it into his arms. The puppy was surprisingly heavy for its size, and as Daniel carried it toward the truck, he noticed something else that made him pause. Around the animal's neck was the torn piece of a thick black collar, almost like something had ripped it off violently. No tag, no owner information, just a faded red symbol scratched into the leather that Daniel couldn't recognize in the darkness. The puppy suddenly lifted its head and looked toward the forest across the highway. Its body became completely still. Daniel followed its stare, but all he could see were rows of pine trees swaying gently in the wind. Then, somewhere deep in the woods, a distant metallic sound echoed through the darkness. The puppy immediately let out a low growl unlike anything Daniel had ever heard before. Daniel stood frozen beside his truck as the strange growl faded into the cold night air. The sound coming from the puppy did not match its size at all. It was too deep, too controlled, almost like a warning instead of fear. The little creature kept staring toward the dark forest across the highway, its body tense beneath Daniel's jacket. For several long seconds, neither of them moved. Then another metallic noise echoed faintly through the trees, followed by what sounded like distant tires crunching over gravel somewhere far off in the darkness. The puppy immediately pressed closer against Daniel's chest. "All right," Daniel whispered quietly. "You are coming with me." He climbed back into the truck and placed the animal carefully on the passenger seat. The puppy circled once before curling tightly against the old leather seat without making a sound. Daniel pulled back onto the empty highway, but he could not shake the strange feeling lingering in his chest. Every few minutes he glanced toward the passenger seat. Most puppies would have been nervous, barking, or moving around after being picked up by a stranger. This one stayed completely still the entire drive home. 20 minutes later, Daniel turned onto the long dirt road leading to his property just outside Cedar Ridge. His small house sat alone near the edge of the woods with an old detached garage beside it and miles of open land stretching behind the property. The porch light flickered softly as Daniel parked the truck and looked over at the animal again. The puppy was awake, staring out the windshield toward the tree line surrounding the house. Its golden eyes reflected the porch light in an unsettling way. "You really are something strange, huh?" Daniel muttered. He carried the animal inside and placed it gently near the fireplace while he grabbed towels from the bathroom. The puppy immediately began scanning the room carefully, moving slowly through the house as if studying every detail. Daniel noticed how unusually balanced it was. Even injured, it moved with strange precision. Not clumsy like a normal young dog. Deliberate. Focused. He filled a metal bowl with water and another with leftover turkey from the refrigerator. The puppy ignored the water completely and went straight for the meat, eating quietly but fast. Daniel crouched nearby, watching it carefully. Up close, the animal looked even stranger. Its paws seemed slightly oversized, and there was a faint pattern beneath the fur near its neck, almost like darker stripes hidden under the coat. "Maybe you have some wolf in you," Daniel joked softly. The puppy suddenly stopped eating and looked directly at him again. Daniel laughed nervously. Okay, that was weird. He tried calling the local animal shelter, but nobody answered that late at night. After a while, he spread an old blanket near the fireplace for the puppy before heading upstairs to shower. Yet even under the hot water, he could not stop thinking about the torn black collar, or the strange symbol burned into the leather, or the way the animal had reacted to those distant sounds in the woods. Nearly 40 minutes later, Daniel came back downstairs wearing sweatpants and carrying a beer from the refrigerator. The house had gone strangely quiet. Too quiet. "Hey, buddy," he called out casually. No response. The blanket near the fireplace was empty. Daniel frowned and checked the kitchen first. Then the laundry room. Nothing. "Come on," he muttered under his breath. He searched the entire first floor before finally noticing the back door slightly open. Cold wind drifted inside from the darkness outside. Daniel's stomach tightened instantly. He grabbed a flashlight from the counter and stepped onto the porch. "Puppy," he called out. The woods behind the property swayed softly beneath the moonlight. For a moment, there was only silence. Then Daniel heard something moving near the detached garage about 30 yards away. He aimed the flashlight toward the building and froze. The puppy was sitting perfectly still on top of an old workbench visible through the garage window, watching the forest. Not the house. Not Daniel. The forest. And the low growl slowly rising from its throat sounded even deeper than before. Daniel slowly lowered the flashlight, unable to explain why the sight in front of him unsettled him so deeply. The puppy sat completely motionless on the old wooden workbench inside the garage, staring into the dark forest behind the property as though it was listening for something hidden beyond the trees. The low growl vibrating in its throat sounded steady and controlled, not frightened. Like before, almost protective. "Hey," Daniel called softly, stepping closer through the damp grass. "What are you looking at?" The puppy immediately stopped growling and turned its head toward him. For a second, its golden eyes flashed brightly beneath the flashlight beam, and Daniel felt that same strange chill run through him again. Then the animal jumped down from the workbench with unnatural grace and walked calmly toward him. Daniel exhaled slowly, feeling ridiculous for being nervous around something so small. "You are really starting to creep me out," he muttered. The puppy brushed past his leg and headed back toward the house without hesitation, as though it already knew where it belonged. Over the next few days, Daniel tried convincing himself that everything strange about the animal could still be explained. Maybe it was part wolf. Maybe someone had a legally bred exotic dog somewhere nearby. Montana was full of strange people living off-grid in the mountains. Still, little things kept bothering him. The puppy learned routines impossibly fast. By the third morning, it already knew how to open the back screen door by pressing its paw against the loose corner near the handle. It never barked at strangers or passing cars like normal dogs. Instead, it quietly watched everything around the property with intense focus. Sometimes Daniel would catch it staring out the windows for hours without moving at all. And every night around exactly 3 in the morning, the puppy disappeared. At first, Daniel assumed it was sneaking outside to explore the woods. But one freezing morning, he woke up early and found muddy paw prints all over the kitchen floor leading back from the yard. The strange part was how large the prints looked. Much larger than they should have been. Daniel crouched beside them, frowning. "That does not make any sense," he whispered. The puppy sat near the refrigerator watching him silently. It was growing fast too. Too fast. In less than 2 weeks, its shoulders had broadened noticeably, and its dark coat had become thicker with silver streaks running beneath the fur. Even Earl Simmons, Daniel's elderly neighbor from down the road, noticed something unusual. One afternoon, Earl stopped by the garage while Daniel changed oil beneath an old Ford pickup. The puppy lay nearby in the shade watching them. Earl narrowed his eyes the moment he saw it. "That thing yours?" he asked cautiously. Daniel nodded. "Found him near Route 16 a couple weeks ago." Earl kept staring at the animal. "You sure that is a dog?" Daniel laughed awkwardly. "Pretty sure." But Earl did not smile. The old man slowly shook his head. "I grew up hunting these woods. Never seen anything look at people like that before." The puppy suddenly lifted its head toward Earl, and the old man took an uneasy step backward. "You ought to be careful, Danny." Later that same night, Daniel began hearing rumors spreading through Cedar Ridge. Several ranchers outside town had reported missing chickens and strange noises near their barns after midnight. One woman claimed she saw a large shadow moving near her fence line before dawn. Another rancher swore something had climbed onto the roof of his storage shed. Daniel tried ignoring the stories until he noticed the puppy reacting every single time the local news mentioned the incidents. It would immediately stop whatever it was doing and stare directly at the television screen. By the end of the month, the animal had nearly doubled in size. Yet despite its strange behavior, it had also become deeply attached to Daniel. It followed him from room to room, slept beside the front door every night, and once even alerted him to smoke coming from a faulty wire in the garage before the small electrical fire spread. Daniel had started calling it Ash because of the silver-black fur around its neck, and somehow the name fit perfectly. But late one snowy evening, Daniel discovered something that made his stomach drop. He was cleaning the garage when he noticed deep claw marks carved into one of the wooden support beams nearly 7 feet above the floor. Fresh splinters still covered the concrete beneath it. Daniel slowly looked down at Ash lying nearby. The animal looked back at him calmly. Then it stood up on its hind legs for just a second to stretch against the wall beside the beam. And Daniel realized with horror that Ash was already tall enough to reach the marks. Daniel barely slept after discovering the claw marks in the garage. Every time he closed his eyes, he pictured Ash standing on its hind legs beneath the wooden beam, tall enough to reach scratches nearly 7 feet off the ground. By sunrise, he had convinced himself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe the marks were old. Maybe another animal had gotten into the garage months earlier. But deep down, he knew neither excuse made sense. Ash was changing too quickly. The next morning, snow covered the property in a thin white layer as Daniel stepped outside, carrying coffee toward the garage. Ash followed closely beside him, moving silently through the snow despite now weighing close to 80 pounds. What unsettled Daniel most was how quietly the creature moved. Even large dogs made noise running across frozen ground, but Ash barely made a sound at all. Daniel unlocked the garage and immediately froze. Tools were scattered across the floor. One of the heavy metal shelves near the back wall had been knocked sideways during the night. Yet nothing had been stolen. "What the hell?" Daniel whispered. Ash slowly walked past him into the garage and sniffed the air carefully. Then the animal let out another low growl while staring toward the far corner near the old side entrance. Daniel noticed the door was slightly open. Cold air drifted inside through the crack. His stomach tightened instantly. He knew he had locked it before bed. Daniel grabbed a tire iron leaning nearby and carefully pushed the door open wider. Outside, fresh tracks led away from the garage toward the woods. At first he thought they belonged to deer, but when he crouched closer his blood ran cold. There were 2 completely different sets of prints in the snow. One looked human, the other did not. The second tracks were enormous, almost wolf-like, but unnaturally narrow and long. Daniel slowly turned back toward Ash standing silently behind him. "Those are not yours," he said nervously, though he was not fully sure anymore. Ash kept staring toward the forest. Then suddenly every muscle in the animal's body stiffened. Its ears flattened slightly as another distant metallic sound echoed somewhere far beyond the trees. The exact same sound Daniel had heard the night he found it. Ash immediately moved in front of him protectively, growling much louder now. Daniel felt genuine fear for the first time since bringing the creature home. Later that afternoon, he drove into Cedar Ridge hoping to distract himself at work, but the entire town seemed tense. At Miller's gas station, a group of ranchers stood around discussing another strange incident from the night before. One farmer claimed something had broken into his livestock pen without damaging the fence. Another swore he saw glowing eyes near his property at 3 a.m. Daniel stayed quiet while pumping gas, but he could feel his chest tightening with every story. Then Sheriff Colin Reeves stepped out of the station, holding a folded report. "Whatever is out there," the sheriff said grimly, "it is moving fast and staying close to the highway." Daniel immediately thought of the abandoned research facility 15 miles north of Route 16, the same direction where he had found Ash. Back at home, that evening Daniel decided he needed answers. He called the nearest veterinary clinic and scheduled an appointment for the following morning. Maybe a professional could finally explain what kind of animal Ash actually was. But that night something happened Daniel could not ignore. Around 2:30 in the morning, Ash suddenly jumped up from beside the front door and sprinted toward the back of the house. Daniel woke instantly to the sound of deep growling downstairs. He grabbed his flashlight and rushed into the kitchen just in time to see Ash standing rigid in front of the back window. Snow swirled outside beneath the moonlight. At first Daniel saw nothing. Then a dark figure moved briefly between the trees near the edge of the property. Human, tall, watching the house. Daniel's heartbeat nearly stopped. Before he could react, the figure disappeared back into the woods. Ash continued growling for several more seconds before finally calming down. Then the creature slowly turned toward Daniel. Snowy moonlight reflected across its golden eyes as it stepped closer and pressed its head gently against his hand like a loyal dog seeking reassurance. But Daniel could no longer ignore the terrifying question growing in his mind. Was Ash protecting him from something in those woods? Or was something in those woods trying to get Ash back? The following morning, Daniel barely touched his breakfast before loading Ash into the truck for the drive to Cedar Ridge Veterinary Clinic. Snow clouds hung low over the mountains, turning the entire highway gray and silent. Ash sat unusually still in the passenger seat during the drive, staring out the window toward the passing forest with intense focus. Every now and then its ears twitched as though it could hear sounds Daniel could not. The deeper they drove into town, the more uneasy the animal became. By the time Daniel parked outside the clinic, Ash was quietly growling beneath its breath again. "Relax," Daniel said softly while clipping a heavy leash onto the thick black collar he had bought 2 days earlier. "We are just getting answers." Inside the waiting room, several people immediately turned to stare. Ash had grown so quickly that most people no longer saw a puppy when they looked at it. The creature now stood nearly waist-high with broad shoulders and piercing golden eyes that never stopped scanning the room. A little boy sitting near the front desk reached out excitedly toward Ash, but the moment the animal looked at him, the child slowly pulled his hand back and moved closer to his mother without understanding why. Even the clinic receptionist looked uncomfortable. "Wow," she said nervously. "What breed is he?" Daniel forced a smile. "That is what I am hoping to find out." A few minutes later, Dr. Melissa Carter entered the waiting room, holding a clipboard. She was in her early 40s with calm eyes and years of experience working with large animals across Montana ranch country. But even she paused slightly when Ash lifted its head toward her. "That is definitely not your average dog," she admitted quietly. Inside the examination room, Ash immediately began pacing in slow circles while sniffing every corner. Dr. Carter tried remaining calm as she checked its weight and listened to its breathing. "How old did you say this animal was?" she asked. Daniel shook his head. "I honestly do not know. I found him near Route 16 about a month ago." Dr. Carter frowned while examining the unusual shape of Ash's paws. "These proportions are strange," she murmured. "The muscle growth alone does not make sense for an animal this young." Ash suddenly stopped pacing and stared directly at the metal scanner sitting beside the examination table. Its body stiffened instantly. Daniel noticed the low growl beginning again. "Easy," he whispered. Dr. Carter slowly crouched beside Ash. "I want to check for a microchip," she explained carefully. If this animal belonged to someone, we might finally identify it. The moment she reached for the scanner, Ash backed away sharply and bared its teeth for the first time since Daniel had found it. Not aggressively, fearfully. Daniel had never seen the creature react like that before. Hey, he said calmly. Nobody is hurting you. Dr. Carter hesitated before switching on the scanner anyway. The second the device beeped, Ash let out a deep growl that rattled the entire room. Then every light inside the clinic flickered once. Dr. Carter froze. That was odd, she whispered. The scanner suddenly displayed a string of numbers across the small screen before flashing a message neither of them understood. Property of Orion Genetics. Access restricted. Then the entire scanner shut off by itself. At the exact same moment, every computer screen at the front desk went black. Daniel stared at Dr. Carter in confusion. What is Orion Genetics? He asked. But the veterinarian looked pale now. I have never heard of it, she admitted quietly. But private companies do not usually microchip animals like this. Ash stopped growling and slowly moved closer to Daniel's side, as though seeking protection. Dr. Carter glanced nervously toward the clinic windows before lowering her voice. Daniel, where exactly did you find this animal? Before he could answer, the clinic receptionist suddenly rushed into the room looking shaken. Dr. Carter, she said breathlessly, there are 2 black SUVs outside asking questions about a missing animal. Daniel felt his stomach drop instantly. Ash immediately turned toward the hallway and growled louder than ever before. The growl coming from Ash echoed through the examination room so deeply that even the metal cabinets vibrated slightly. Daniel instinctively tightened his grip on the leash, while Dr. Carter slowly stepped backward from the door. Outside in the hallway, muffled voices moved closer. Sir, we need to speak with the owner of the animal immediately. The voice sounded calm, almost rehearsed, but something about it made Daniel's pulse spike. Ash positioned itself directly in front of him now, muscles tense beneath its dark coat, golden eyes fixed on the doorway. Then came 3 slow knocks. Dr. Carter swallowed nervously. Daniel, maybe you should let me handle this. But before either of them could move, the clinic receptionist hurried past the room again, whispering shakily. They already know his name. Daniel's blood ran cold. Nobody in Cedar Ridge should have known anything about Ash. He had never posted photos online. He had barely even spoken about the animal outside town. Yet somehow these people already knew exactly what they were looking for. The door slowly opened and 2 men stepped inside, wearing black winter jackets with no visible logos. Both looked to be in their 40s with the calm expression of people used to controlling situations. One of them held a thin electronic tablet, while the other kept his eyes locked entirely on Ash. Neither man looked surprised by the creature's appearance. That frightened Daniel more than anything else. Mr. Brooks, the taller man said politely. My name is Victor Hale. We are with Orion Genetics Recovery Division. Daniel immediately glanced at Dr. Carter, whose face had gone pale. Recovery Division? Daniel repeated. Victor nodded calmly. The animal in your possession belongs to our company. Ash responded with another low growl and stepped even closer to Daniel's side. Victor's expression shifted slightly when he saw the reaction. Interesting, he murmured quietly. It bonded faster than expected. Daniel stared at him in disbelief. What exactly is this thing? For the first time, Victor hesitated before answering. Several months ago, he said carefully, a private research transport outside Billings experienced a containment failure during severe weather conditions. One specimen escaped before recovery teams arrived. Daniel felt sick hearing the word specimen instead of animal. You were telling me Ash escaped from some kind of lab? Victor slowly nodded. Its designation is A-17. Ash immediately reacted to the sound of the designation, ears flattening as another growl rumbled from its chest. The second man finally spoke for the first time. Do not say the identification code again, he warned quietly. It elevates stress responses. Daniel looked between them in horror. Stress responses? What the hell did you people create? Victor sighed heavily before lowering the tablet. A-17 was part of an experimental hybrid predator program designed to improve intelligence, environmental adaptation, and threat detection for wilderness rescue operations. Dr. Carter stared at him in disbelief. You engineered this animal? Victor ignored her. The project was never intended for public exposure. Unfortunately, the specimen developed beyond projected behavioral limits. Daniel's chest tightened. Suddenly, every strange thing made terrifying sense. The rapid growth, the glowing eyes, the unusual strength, the intelligence. Ash was not a stray puppy at all. It had been designed, created. How dangerous is it? Daniel asked quietly. Victor exchanged a quick glance with the other man before answering carefully. Under stress, a 17 can become highly territorial and unpredictable. But the second man spoke bluntly. 3 handlers were injured during containment training before the transport failure. Ash immediately bared its teeth toward him. Daniel noticed something strange then. The creature was not reacting aggressively toward him or Dr. Carter, only toward the Orion men. Victor took a slow step forward. Mr. Brooks, we need you to hand over the specimen peacefully. Ash instantly moved between them again, growling louder than ever. Victor stopped walking. That level of attachment was not supposed to happen, he admitted softly. Daniel looked down at Ash, standing protectively beside him, and felt completely torn apart inside. This creature had slept beside his front door every night. It had followed him like family, warned him about danger, protected his home. Yet now he was being told the animal beside him was something engineered in a laboratory and considered dangerous enough to trigger recovery teams across the state. Then Dr. Carter suddenly looked toward the clinic windows and whispered in shock, "Oh my God." Daniel turned just in time to see at least 4 more black SUVs pulling silently into the snowy parking lot outside. Snow continued falling outside the veterinary clinic as the line of black SUVs filled the parking lot one by one. Their headlights cut through the gray Montana afternoon like silent warnings. Inside the examination room, nobody moved. Ash stood rigid beside Daniel, its thick silver-black fur raised slightly along the spine, while low growls echoed deep in its chest. Daniel could feel the tension in the animal's body through the leash. But something about the situation suddenly stopped making sense to him. If Ash was truly some uncontrollable monster, why had it never once tried to hurt him? Why had it spent every night protecting his house instead of attacking people? Victor Hale slowly raised both hands in a calm gesture. "Mr. Brooks, I understand this is difficult," he said carefully. "But you need to understand that a 17 was not designed to live freely among civilians." Daniel kept his eyes on Ash. "You keep calling him A-17, he replied coldly. "His name is Ash." For the first time, Victor looked genuinely unsettled. Ash immediately stopped growling the moment Daniel spoke its name and pressed slightly against his side like a loyal dog seeking reassurance. Even the Orion agents noticed the reaction. The second man frowned quietly. "The attachment is stronger than the reports predicted." Victor lowered his voice. "Daniel, has Ash shown aggression toward you?" Daniel shook his head instantly. "Never." "Toward your neighbors?" "No." "Toward anyone besides your recovery teams?" Victor hesitated. "That is not the point." But Dr. Carter suddenly stepped forward. "Actually, I think that is exactly the point," she said firmly. "You people called this thing dangerous, yet it has shown more restraint than most frightened animals I treat." Victor's calm expression tightened slightly. "Doctor, with respect, you do not understand what this specimen is capable of under stress." Daniel glanced down at Ash again. The creature was no longer staring at him or Dr. Carter. It remained focused entirely on the Orion agents outside the room, watching them carefully, tracking every movement. Then Daniel remembered the shadow he had seen outside his property 2 nights earlier. The open garage door, the strange tracks in the snow. Suddenly, a terrifying realization hit him. "You have been following us this entire time," he said quietly. Victor did not deny it. "Recovery teams tracked A-17 to your property shortly after the clinic scanner activated the chip." Daniel's jaw tightened. "No. Before that." Ash knew someone was watching the house days ago. The room fell silent. Victor finally sighed. "We attempted passive observation first." "Observation?" Daniel snapped. "You were sneaking around my property in the middle of the night." Ash suddenly let out another deep growl as footsteps approached outside the examination room door. 2 more Orion agents appeared carrying metal containment poles and heavy tranquilizer equipment. The second Ash saw the gear, the creature immediately positioned itself in front of Daniel again protectively. Daniel's heart sank. That was not fear. That was recognition. Ash knew exactly what those tools were for. Victor noticed it too. "Everybody stay calm," he warned quietly. One of the agents stepped forward carefully. "Sir, we strongly recommend sedation before transport." Ash instantly bared its teeth. Daniel tightened his grip on the leash. "Back up," he said firmly. The agents hesitated. Then something unexpected happened. One of the overhead lights outside the room suddenly burst with a loud pop, showering sparks into the hallway. Everyone flinched except Ash. The creature reacted before anybody else even understood what happened. In a blur of movement, Ash lunged sideways and slammed against Daniel hard enough to knock him backward. Behind the examination table, a split second later, a heavy ceiling panel crashed directly onto the spot where Daniel had been standing. The entire room froze. Dust filled the air while pieces of broken tile scattered across the floor. Daniel stared at the collapsed ceiling in complete shock. If Ash had not moved him, the falling debris would have hit him directly. Ash stood protectively over Daniel, growling toward the damaged ceiling while the Orion agents looked equally stunned. Even Victor seemed speechless for a moment. Dr. Carter slowly turned toward him. "That animal just saved his life." Nobody answered her. Outside the clinic windows, the snowstorm had grown heavier, covering the parking lot in white. Sirens echoed faintly somewhere in the distance. Ash finally relaxed slightly and looked down at Daniel with those strange golden eyes that no longer seemed frightening at all. For the first time since learning the truth, Daniel realized something deeply unsettling. Whatever Orion genetics had created, Ash was not acting like a predator trying to escape. It was acting like something terrified of being taken back. For several long seconds, nobody inside the examination room spoke. Dust drifted slowly through the cold fluorescent light, while the broken ceiling panel lay scattered across the floor where Daniel had been standing moments earlier. Ash remained directly in front of him, shoulders tense, golden eyes scanning every corner of the room as though expecting another threat. Daniel slowly reached out and placed a trembling hand against the thick fur along Ash's neck. The creature immediately calmed beneath his touch. Victor Hale stared at the scene in silence before finally lowering his voice. That response was protective, he admitted reluctantly. One of the Orion agents near the doorway looked confused. Protective behavior was not supposed to develop this strongly. Dr. Carter folded her arms tightly. "Maybe because you stopped treating it like an animal and started treating it like equipment." Nobody answered her. Outside, the storm had worsened. Snow hammered against the clinic windows while wind rattled the building hard enough to shake the lights. Again, then suddenly another loud crash echoed from somewhere near the parking lot. One of the agents rushed toward the front lobby to investigate. Seconds later, his voice shouted through the hallway. "Something is moving near the vehicles." Every Orion agent instantly reacted. Victor turned toward Daniel sharply. "Stay inside this room." But Ash was already growling again, louder this time, staring toward the front entrance of the clinic. Daniel noticed something different in the animal's behavior now. This was not fear. Ash looked alert, focused, like it recognized a danger nobody else could see yet. Then the power suddenly went out across the entire building. Darkness swallowed the clinic instantly except for faint emergency lights glowing red along the hallway floor. Somewhere outside came the screech of twisting metal followed by shouting in the parking lot. Dr. Carter gasped softly. "What is happening?" Victor grabbed a flashlight from his jacket. "Everybody stay calm." But Ash suddenly lunged toward the hallway before Daniel could tighten the leash. "Ash!" Daniel shouted, racing after the creature into the dark clinic corridor. The emergency lights cast long shadows across overturned chairs and frightened staff members huddled near the front desk. Outside the shattered glass entrance doors, snow whipped violently through the parking lot. One of the black SUVs had slid sideways into a ditch near the road after losing control on the ice. Daniel could barely see through the storm, but he noticed one Orion agent trapped beside the damaged vehicle struggling to free himself from a bent door while sparks flickered from the engine. The rest of the recovery team hesitated several yards away, unable to reach him safely across the icy pavement. Then before anyone could stop it, Ash bolted outside into the blizzard. "No!" Victor shouted. Daniel sprinted after the creature into knee-deep snow. Wind roared across the parking lot as Ash moved with incredible speed through the storm. The trapped Orion agent looked up in terror the moment he saw the large hybrid creature approaching through the snow. But instead of attacking, Ash planted itself beside the damaged SUV and braced its body against the twisted frame. Daniel watched in disbelief as the creature pushed hard enough to shift the heavy vehicle several inches across the ice, freeing the trapped man's leg. The Orion agent scrambled backward in shock, while Ash remained standing protectively between him and the unstable vehicle. Victor slowly stepped forward through the snow, staring at Ash with complete disbelief. "It is helping him," one of the agents whispered. The trapped man looked pale and shaken. "It could have left me there," he muttered breathlessly. Ash ignored all of them and instead turned its attention toward the dark tree line across the highway. Every muscle in its body tightened again. Daniel followed its stare and suddenly saw movement between the snow-covered pines. Multiple figures, watching from the woods. Victor noticed them too. His expression changed instantly from shock to alarm. "Everybody back inside now," he ordered sharply. "Those are not our people." Daniel's pulse spiked. Ash immediately moved beside him again, growling low and deep while positioning itself protectively at his side despite the freezing wind. In that terrifying moment, Daniel finally understood the truth. Orion genetics had not come to Cedar Ridge simply because Ash escaped. Someone else had been hunting the creature too, and whatever was hiding in those woods had just found them. The freezing wind howled across the clinic parking lot as everyone stared toward the dark forest beyond the highway. Snow swirled violently between the trees, partially hiding the shadowy figures watching from the woods. Ash stood rigid beside Daniel, its deep growl vibrating through the storm, while every Orion agent slowly backed toward the clinic entrance with visible tension on their faces. Victor Hale's calm expression had completely vanished now. "Move inside," he ordered sharply. "Now." Daniel followed him toward the building while Ash remained close at his side, never taking its eyes off the tree line. The moment the clinic doors shut behind them, Victor turned toward his team. "Seal the entrances. Nobody leaves alone." Dr. Carter stared at him in disbelief. "Who are those people out there?" Victor hesitated before answering. "Corporate thieves. Illegal buyers. Private groups that learned about the hybrid program after the containment breach." Daniel felt sick hearing it. "You mean people have been hunting Ash this whole time?" Victor nodded grimly. "Hey, 17 is worth millions to the wrong people." Ash immediately reacted to the designation again, ears flattening as it moved closer to Daniel. This time Daniel ignored the Orion agents completely and crouched beside the creature. "It is okay," he whispered softly. Ash pressed its head against his shoulder for just a moment before lifting its gaze toward the windows again. Outside, headlights suddenly appeared through the storm near the tree line. More vehicles. Victor cursed quietly beneath his breath. "We do not have enough time." One of the agents looked toward him nervously. "What do we do with the specimen?" Victor remained silent for several seconds before making a decision that shocked everyone in the room. "We are not taking it back." Daniel looked up instantly. "What?" Victor exhaled heavily. "You were right about one thing, Mr. Brooks. Whatever Ash was designed to become, it changed after bonding with you." Even saying the name Ash seemed difficult for him now. Returning it to the facility would only restart the cycle. Dr. Carter crossed her arms. "So what happens now?" Victor looked toward the snow-covered mountains visible beyond the windows. "There is a protected wildlife sanctuary nearly 200 miles north near the Canadian border. Remote terrain. Restricted access. If Ash disappears there, nobody will ever find it again." Daniel stared at him in disbelief. "You are just letting him go?" Victor's eyes darkened slightly. "After what I saw tonight, I am beginning to think the creature we created is not the real danger." Outside, the storm continued growing stronger. The mysterious vehicles remained hidden near the woods, waiting. Daniel slowly looked down at Ash and felt his chest tighten painfully. For months, this creature had become part of his life. It had slept beside his front door, followed him through the garage every morning, and protected him again and again despite everything happening around them. The thought of losing it suddenly hurt far more than he expected. Several hours later, under the cover of the blizzard, Daniel drove north through the mountains with Ash lying silently in the back seat of the truck. Victor had provided a route avoiding highways and towns while Orion agents stayed behind to mislead the people tracking them. Snow covered the roads in thick white sheets as dawn slowly approached over the frozen Montana wilderness. Just before sunrise, Daniel finally reached the edge of the remote sanctuary. Endless pine forests stretched toward distant mountains untouched by civilization. Ash slowly climbed out of the truck and stood beside him in the deep snow. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Daniel swallowed hard as he removed the black collar from Ash's neck. "You deserve better than being hunted your whole life," he said quietly. Ash stared at him with those strange golden eyes that no longer looked frightening at all. Then something unexpected happened. The massive creature stepped forward and gently pressed its forehead against Daniel's chest one final time. Daniel closed his eyes, resting his hand against the thick silver-black fur while emotion